I've reached the age of 101, and I want to share something that shocks every doctor who looks at my medical records. For the past 70 years, I have eaten cheese and drunk wine almost every single day. Not occasionally, not on special occasions, every single day. And when my cardiologist saw my latest test results, he sat back in his chair, looked at me with genuine disbelief, and said something I'll never forget. "Your arteries look better than mine, and I'm 45 years old." Now, before you think this is permission to raid your wine cellar and cheese board, stay with me. Because what I'm about to reveal contradicts everything the health establishment has told you about saturated fat, alcohol, and longevity. And by the end of this conversation, you'll understand the precise biological mechanisms that explain why this combination, when done correctly, may be one of the most protective dietary patterns ever studied. But first, if you value evidence-based health information that challenges conventional wisdom, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, and turn on your notification bell. We're building a community of people who want the truth about health, not just the headlines. Your support helps us continue creating content that actually makes a difference in your life. Let me paint you a picture of what my daily routine looks like. Every afternoon around 4 p.m., I sit down with a small wedge of aged cheese, usually Parmigiano Reggiano or a sharp-aged cheddar, and I pour myself exactly 5 ounces of red wine. Sometimes it's a Cabernet Sauvignon, sometimes it's a Pinot Noir, but it's always red, and it's always with cheese. I've been doing this since I was 31 years old. That's 7 decades of what modern nutritionists would call dietary rebellion. And here's what happened. At 101, my LDL cholesterol is 95. My HDL cholesterol is 68. My triglycerides are 82. My blood pressure averages 118/76. I have 0 calcium deposits in my coronary arteries. 0. My inflammatory markers, C-reactive protein specifically, measure 0.4 milligrams per liter. That's in the low-risk category for cardiovascular disease. My cognitive function tests place me in the 92nd percentile for my age group, and I've never had a stroke, a heart attack, or been diagnosed with dementia. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's just good genetics. You would have lived this long anyway. And genetics do play a role. But here's what you need to understand. I come from a family with significant cardiovascular disease. My father died of a heart attack at 63. My mother had her first stroke at 71. My younger brother, who avoided cheese and alcohol his entire life because he was terrified of what happened to our parents, died of coronary artery disease at 78. So this isn't just genetic luck. Something else is happening here. Something that involves the specific combination of compounds found in aged cheese and red wine, and how they interact with your cardiovascular system, your gut microbiome, and your cellular aging processes. Before we go deeper, I want to be very clear about something. I am not suggesting that everyone should start drinking wine and eating cheese every day. What I'm going to share with you is the science behind why this pattern worked for me, and why it contradicts so much of what you've been told about saturated fat and alcohol. Your health decisions need to be made with your own doctor based on your individual medical history. But you deserve to understand the complete picture, not just the oversimplified version that treats all saturated fat as evil and all alcohol as poison. Let me start with the cheese, because this is where the biggest misconception exists. For decades, we've been told that saturated fat clogs your arteries, raises your cholesterol, and kills you slowly. And if that were the complete story, I should be dead. But it's not the complete story, because not all saturated fats behave the same way in your body. The type of saturated fat matters, the food matrix it comes in matters, and the presence of other compounds matters enormously. Aged cheese contains a unique fatty acid profile. About 70% of the fat is saturated, yes, but it's packaged in a protein and calcium matrix that fundamentally changes how your body processes it. When you eat aged cheese, you're not just eating saturated fat, you're eating vitamin K2, a nutrient that most people are desperately deficient in. Vitamin K2 activates a protein called matrix GLA protein. And this protein's job is to pull calcium out of your soft tissues, out of your arterial walls, and deposit it where it belongs, in your bones. This is why populations that consume high amounts of aged cheese have lower rates of arterial calcification despite consuming high amounts of saturated fat. A study published in the journal Nutrients in 2018 followed over 2,000 participants for 10 years and found that those with the highest intake of vitamin K2 had a 52% lower risk of severe arterial calcification compared to those with the lowest intake. Aged cheese is one of the richest sources of K2 on the planet. Then there's the calcium content. A single ounce of Parmesan cheese contains approximately 330 milligrams of calcium. When you consume calcium with fat, particularly with vitamin K2, you're supporting bone density while simultaneously protecting your cardiovascular system. At 101, my bone density scans show minimal osteoporosis. My spine shows some age-related compression, but my hip bones are remarkably intact. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Aged cheese contains something called spermidine. Spermidine is a polyamine compound that triggers a cellular process called autophagy. Autophagy is your body's way of cleaning out damaged cells, recycling cellular components, and maintaining cellular health. It's one of the most important longevity mechanisms we know of. A 2018 study published in Nature Medicine found that dietary spermidine supplementation extended the lifespan of mice by up to 25% and improved cardiac health. In humans, higher dietary spermidine intake has been associated with reduced cardiovascular mortality. Aged cheese, particularly varieties like Parmesan and aged cheddar, contain some of the highest levels of spermidine found in any food. Now, let's talk about the wine, because this is where things get truly fascinating. Red wine contains a group of compounds called polyphenols. The most famous is resveratrol. But there are hundreds of others, including quercetin, catechins, and anthocyanins. These compounds are powerful antioxidants, but that's not their primary benefit. Their real power lies in something called hormetic stress. Hormetic stress is the concept that small amounts of stress actually make your cells stronger. When you consume polyphenols from red wine, they create a mild oxidative challenge to your cells. Your cells respond by upregulating their own antioxidant defense systems. They produce more glutathione, more superoxide dismutase, more catalase. These are your body's internal antioxidant enzymes, and they're far more powerful than any antioxidant you could ever consume. A landmark study published in The Lancet in 1979, known as the French Paradox Study, first documented this phenomenon. French populations consumed high amounts of saturated fat but had significantly lower rates of heart disease compared to other Western nations. The proposed explanation was their regular, moderate consumption of red wine. Subsequent research has confirmed that moderate red wine consumption is associated with a 30% reduction in cardiovascular mortality. But here's the critical word: moderate. For men, that means no more than 5 to 6 ounces per day. For women, 3 to 4 ounces. More than this, and the benefits reverse. Alcohol is a toxin. Your liver has to process it. Excessive consumption causes inflammation, damages your gut lining, and increases cancer risk. But in small, consistent amounts, red wine triggers beneficial stress responses that strengthen your cardiovascular system. If you're finding this information valuable, if this is challenging what you thought you knew about nutrition and longevity, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're creating content that goes beyond surface-level health advice, and your support allows us to continue doing this important work. A simple click makes a real difference. Now, here's where the magic really happens. When you combine cheese and wine together, you create a synergistic effect that's more powerful than either one alone. The polyphenols in red wine enhance the absorption of vitamin K2 from cheese. The fat in cheese slows down the absorption of alcohol, preventing blood sugar spikes and reducing the inflammatory impact of the alcohol. The calcium in cheese binds to certain compounds in wine called tannins, creating a smoother, less astringent taste, but also altering the way these compounds interact with your gut bacteria. Your gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your intestinal tract, plays a massive role in your health. And certain bacteria thrive on the combination of dairy fats and wine polyphenols. These bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which are anti-inflammatory and protective against colon cancer. A 2019 study in the journal Gut Microbes found that moderate wine consumption combined with full-fat dairy increased the diversity and health of gut bacteria more than either food consumed alone. This improved gut health translates to better immune function, reduced systemic inflammation, and improved nutrient absorption. Let me tell you about my last visit to my cardiologist, because this really drives home what I'm talking about. He's a brilliant physician, Harvard-educated, runs a major cardiology practice. He ran something called a coronary artery calcium scan on me. This is a CT scan that measures the amount of calcium buildup in your coronary arteries. A score of 0 means no detectable calcium. A score of 1 to 100 indicates minimal plaque. 100 to 400 is moderate. Anything over 400 is severe and indicates high risk for heart attack. The average score for a man my age, if he's even alive, would be well over 1,000. My score was 12. 12. He made them run the test twice because he thought the machine malfunctioned. When he confirmed it was accurate, he asked me point blank, "What have you been doing your entire life that I need to know about?" I told him about the cheese and wine. I told him about the daily consistency. I told him about the timing. Always in the afternoon, always with food, never on an empty stomach, never to excess. He pulled up research on his computer right there in the office. He spent 20 minutes reading studies while I sat there. And finally he said, "Everything I was taught in medical school told me this should have killed you, but the data supports what you're showing me. This is real." Now let me address the obvious concerns, because I know what you're thinking. What about the alcohol? What about cancer risk? What about liver damage? These are legitimate questions. Here's what the research shows. Heavy alcohol consumption, defined as more than 2 drinks per day for men or 1 drink per day for women, significantly increases your risk of liver disease, certain cancers, and cardiovascular problems. But light to moderate consumption, particularly of red wine, shows a J-shaped curve in the data. No alcohol consumption carries a certain baseline risk. Light to moderate consumption actually shows lower risk than abstinence in many studies. And heavy consumption shows dramatically increased risk. The protective amount is narrow, and it requires discipline. For 70 years, I have never exceeded 5 ounces of wine in a single day. Not once. On days when I felt ill, I skipped it entirely. On days when I was taking certain medications, I skipped it. This isn't about permission to drink more. It's about understanding that small, consistent amounts, in the right context, may offer protection. But the moment you cross that line into excess, everything reverses. If you're still with me, if you're beginning to see how complex and nuanced nutritional science really is, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Leave a comment below telling me what surprised you most about this information. And make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because we're going to continue exploring topics that challenge what you think you know about health and longevity. The cheese concern is about saturated fat and cholesterol. And again, context matters. If you're eating processed cheese, cheese from conventionally raised cows, cheese loaded with additives, you're not getting the same benefits. I eat aged cheese from grass-fed cows. Grass-fed dairy contains higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids, conjugated linoleic acid, and vitamin K2. The aging process concentrates these nutrients and reduces lactose, making it easier to digest, and I eat it in controlled portions, 1 to 2 ounces per day. That's it, not half a block of cheese. Not a cheese platter that could feed a family. Precision matters. There's also the question of individual variation. Some people carry a genetic variant called ApoE4 that makes them hyper-responders to dietary saturated fat. For these individuals, even small amounts of saturated fat can significantly raise LDL cholesterol. If you carry this gene, the approach I'm describing may not work for you. This is why personalized medicine matters. This is why you need to work with a knowledgeable physician who can interpret your labs, your genetics, and your individual risk factors. But for the majority of people who don't carry these genetic variants, who don't have existing liver disease, who don't have contraindications to moderate alcohol, the combination of aged cheese and red wine in small, consistent amounts may offer significant protective benefits, and the mechanism isn't mysterious. It's vitamin K2 protecting your arteries, it's spermidine triggering cellular cleanup, it's polyphenols creating hormetic stress, it's the synergistic effect on your gut microbiome, it's the anti-inflammatory compounds in both foods working together. Let me share one more piece of data that I think is critical. In 2020, a study published in the European Heart Journal analyzed dietary patterns in over 400,000 people across 9 European countries. They found that people who consumed moderate amounts of cheese and wine together had a 22% lower risk of dying from cardiovascular disease compared to those who consumed neither. This wasn't a small study. This wasn't cherry-picked data. This was nearly 500,000 people tracked over decades. Now, as we come toward the end of our time together, I want to emphasize something crucial. I am not a doctor. I'm a 101-year-old person sharing my experience and the science that supports it. Your health is your responsibility. Your decisions need to be informed by your own medical team. But you also deserve access to information that isn't filtered through outdated nutritional dogma. For too long, we've been told that all saturated fat is bad, that all alcohol is dangerous, that longevity requires deprivation and restriction. And yet, some of the longest-lived populations on Earth consume cheese, drink wine, eat full-fat foods, and thrive. The blue zones, regions of the world where people live measurably longer than average, include Sardinia, Italy, and Icaria, Greece. Both of these populations consume significant amounts of cheese and wine. They're not living long despite these foods. They're living long in part because of how these foods interact with their overall dietary pattern. They eat whole foods. They stay physically active, they have strong social connections, and yes, they eat cheese and drink wine. Before we wrap up, I want to make sure you're part of this community. If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Click that notification bell so you never miss our content. And hit the like button to help others discover this information. We're committed to bringing you evidence-based health insights that challenge the status quo, and your engagement makes that possible. So here's my final message to you. Longevity isn't about following rigid rules. It's not about eliminating entire food groups because someone told you they're bad. It's about understanding biochemistry, understanding individual variation, and making informed choices based on real data, not fear. Cheese and wine in the right amounts, in the right context, with the right quality, may be protective. They've been protective for me. They're supported by population-level data. They're supported by mechanistic research on vitamin K2, polyphenols, spermidine, and gut health. But this only works with discipline, with quality, with moderation, and with awareness of your individual health status. If you drink too much, it becomes poison. If you eat too much cheese, the benefits disappear. The dose makes the medicine. At 101 years old, with arteries cleaner than most 50-year-olds, with a sharp mind and strong bones, I'm living proof that the story is more complex than you've been told, and I hope this information empowers you to ask better questions, to dig deeper into the research, and to work with your healthcare team to find what works for your unique biology. Stay curious, stay informed, and subscribe so we can continue this journey together.